May all the people who need refuah and all the good brachot and shefra be answered from the promise of the Zera Shimshon.
Amen.
And may we all see, especially during this special time, may we all see the Geula very soon. So this week's Parshat, Matot Massei, we'll be learning Torah Dalid in right there. The books, Torah Dalid of Matot. It's a unique approach as to why Hashem, about the battle of Midian. So if we look in the Parsha, in Perek Lamed Aleph, Sukkim, Aleph through Gimel, Hashem says, "Vayodeber Hashem al Moshe lemor nekom nikmat bnei Yisrael me'et hamidyanim." Right? Take revenge. Take vengeance for the children of Israel. Me'et hamidyanim, meaning go attack the Midyanim. And afterwards you will, and then it says, "V'achar te'asef elamecha," and afterwards you will be gathered into your people, meaning that Moshe will die. And then Moshe goes out to the people and starts recruiting people, getting the right people. So an interesting fact, not to do with the Zera Shimshon. I heard Rav Biederman mention that the question is, why does it have 1,000? If you look at the list, it says there's 1,000 people, soldiers from each shevet, and then 1,000 other people that go out to basically sit on the sidelines. So you have 24,000 people, 12,000 are soldiers, and 12,000 are sitting on the sidelines learning, according to most Farshim. So the question is, why do they have to be on the sidelines? Right? They don't have to be on the sidelines. They could be literally at their own home. They don't have to be sitting right by the war. So he quoted, I forgot who he quoted already. He said that the 12,000 people who are learning were there to remind the soldiers who's really winning the war. But anyway, so the question is, the Yalkut Shimon, the Midrash, Torah Dalit of Parshat Matot, the Zera Shimshon quotes the Midrash Yalkut, that is the Yalkut Shimoni, and he says, Al pasuk achar te'asef alamecha. So it says, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Im ata rotzeh lechyot shanim harbe, lo yiru Yisrael nekama b'oivehem, v'lo tichbash midyan lifnehem. He gives a condition basically to Moshe, and he says, Moshe, you want to live a long life? No problem. But that means Bnei Israel won't be able to capture Midian. This is the Midrash, not Zera Shimshon. And he said, and he says, Miyad Amar Moshe mutav shetichbash Midian lifnehem v'yiru Yisrael mapilah b'zonehem. It's better, Moshe says, it's better that Bnei Israel capture, meaning that they conquer Midian, and they see it, meaning Bnei Israel see it, and that they see the downfall of their own enemy. That's what the Midrash Yalkut Shimoni says. Yesh l'daktek, the Zera Shimshon asked a question. Yesh l'daktek, ma inyan Moshe im milchamet Midian. Why does Moshe? What's the connection between Moshe and Midian? There could have been a series of battles. And also, why does Moshe have to be so? Why is the death of Moshe so connected to the war with Midian? Well, again, we're in Perek Dalid. Okay, so it's a Torah Dalid of Zera Shimshon on Matot. V'yesh lomar shekatvu mekubalim. So this is the first part, is a little bit of Kabbalistic work. He starts with Kabbalistic work. So far, I haven't found it. I looked in several places. There's something similar in what's called the Yalkut Reuveni, but there's not exactly word for word. And he says, Shekol melech osar sheba la'asot nekama be'ezo umah. Any Jewish king or ruler who wants to take revenge and avenge the pride of the Jewish people with any nation, it means he has to have a connection with that nation. So that's already the beginning, meaning that's kind of like he's setting it up already, saying is that this is the paradigm for almost all Jewish history. The Zera Shimshon is quoting this place, and he's basically saying is that every battle, you'll see that the person who's leading the battle is somewhat connected in some way to the fight itself. And he gives an example. He says, "Kigon Pinchas sheba mibnot." The Zera Shimshon is quoting these mikubalim, these Kabbalists, and he says, "The chibur v'kishor imotam." He says, "Kigon Pinchas sheba mibnot Putiel." That was last week's parsha. Pinchas came from the children of Putiel, the children of Yitro. So he was the one who could go out and fight the people, the Cosby and Zimri, because Cosby, she was from from the Bnot Putiel, and therefore Asani Kama ben Midian. Pinchas was the one who could go and fight and battle Midian because he was from Midian itself. David Shabab Mirut HaMoviah, Asani Kama ben Moab. David himself, David HaMelech, who came from Rut, he's the one who took revenge on Moab. V'Yoshua, this is an interesting one, and it's a little bit of a kind of a backhanded connection, but we'll make it anyway. He says, V'Yoshua, Shaya Zera Yosef. Yoshua, we know, is from Zera Yosef because they were both from, Yosef had two sons, Menashe and Ephraim, and Yoshua comes from Menashe. Yosef, Shenitkadel Beit Potiphar, right? Yosef was raised in Beit Potiphar. The Midrash, the Megillah, the Gemara in Megillah, Daf Yudalit Amud Bet says that Rachav Azona married Yehoshua, married Rachav Azona. So the story of Rachav is famous because she was the one who protected the spies. And Yehoshua later on, according to the Gemara, Gemara in Megillah says that he actually married her. And she knew that this was going to happen. She knew that Yehoshua was going to marry her. And then Yehoshua later on actually waged war with Amalek. And then he goes, then the Mekubalim quote, the Zera Shimshon quotes the Mekubalim, he continues to quote, he said, Amalek, Bilam, the word Amalek and Bilam, Gematria b'Mitzrayim. Amalek and Bilam together, if you take the two words together, you get the Gematria of Mitzrayim. Ki b'Mitzrayim ba Bilam, b'koach Amalek, v'iten itzal paro. Right, we know there's a Gemara in Sota that says that one of the three people that came to give the advice, who were three advisors to Paro, one of them was Bilam. So it says Vayavo Amalek. Where did Amalek come from? In the pasuk, and later on it says Vayavo Amalek. Where did he come from? He came from giving advice to Bilam. Amalek Rosh HaKlipot. Amalek is like the source, if you will, the deep source of all the klipot, of all the bad, evil, all the evil things and evil sources of everything. So the Amalek, basically this kind of roundabout, the roundabout connection is that Yehoshua is connected to Rachav Azona, and therefore he can go out and fight Amalek. We're learning Zera Shimshon Perak Torah Dalet. We'll go back just to review quickly.
Matos.
Matos, thank you, Torah Dalet. And it says, the quotes, the Zera Shimshon quotes the Yalkut Shimoni. Someone at the door? I think someone else is at the door. Unless it was, anyway. So he quotes the Yalkut Shimoni. No? Okay. No? Okay. So he quotes the Yalkut Shimoni, and he says that after Hashem says to Moshe that after you fight the war with Midian, you're going to die. And the Gemara, the Midrash, Yalkut Shimoni says that Hashem says to Moshe, if you want to live a long life, then we can't kill the Midianim. And if you don't, I'll kill them. Israel will conquer. So Moshe says to Hashem, I'd rather that Bnei Israel conquer Midian right away on the spot, and that they should see the downfall of their enemies, and I'll be willing to give up my own pride, basically, my own long life. So that's already a lesson. One of the things that we should learn, quick lesson, is that we should learn a lesson of humility. That Moshe could have easily said is no, I'll live a long life, right? But there was obviously a reason why he said no. I'm willing to give up. So that's already a lesson in humility that we should have in our own selves. I mean, what we should take upon ourselves a little bit more humility and willing to swallow our pride. But anyway, so the Zera Shimshon asked the question, what is the connection between Moshe and Midian? Right? What's the connection between Milchemet Midian and Moshe? Why does Moshe? Because in the pasuk it doesn't. There's a connection. The only connection that we can think of, or natural connection we can think of, is that Midian. Last week's Parshat, Midian was the source of all the chet, and therefore Moshe says, I want to do one more. I want to go to battle. But other than that, there's really no good connection. So the Zera Shimshon quotes the Mekubalim, which is called the Yalkut Ruveni, at least here it calls it the Yalkut Ruveni, and he says that every Jewish king or leader who wants to take revenge against the nation has to have some sort of connection to that nation. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And then he brings a few examples. Pinchas Shabami Benot Putiel, Asani Kama B'Minyan. Right? Pinchas, who came from the Benot Putiel, meaning he was either a grandchild or a child of one of the daughters of Putiel, meaning Yitro. He was able of Yitro, which are the daughters of Midian, and therefore he came and he could do take revenge on Midian. David came from Ruth. He was the one who could take revenge on Moab. Yoshua, he makes a connection between Yoshua, Yosef, and Potiphar and Bilam, and he basically says that Yoshua can take a connection. It can take revenge against Amalek, which we know that happens later on in Sefer Yoshua. Anyways, so far we have this little setup that basically the Zera Shimshon is saying is that in order for a king or a leader to take revenge, a Jewish king or leader to take revenge on a nation within the history of Jewish people, they have to have some sort of connection to it. That's so far what we've got. So far that's what we've got. It's still a little unclear, but we'll get to it in a second. We're going to see. What's that? Right. This is the main question. He says we need to understand what's the reason that this king or this leader has to have a connection with the nation that he's taking revenge upon. That's the biggest question that he's having here. And now I have to honestly, this was the most, there are a lot of Rabbanim who wrote Svarim. Most Rabbanim who write Svarim either that they're known for their halacha, or some are known for their Hasidus, and some are known for their Kabbalah. But not many. We know that the Zera Shimshon was very strong and very well founded and well established in almost all of them, if I'm not mistaken. So he brings a beautiful connection between. And funny that you walk in with your shirt that says gratitude. On the title that I wrote here for this Torah, it says gratitude.
Wow.
I'm just right here. It says gratitude here. Anyway, so we're just getting into it. So it says. So he says is we have to understand what is the connection between Moshe Rabbeinu and the death of Moshe Rabbeinu and and the war with Midian. The Midrash in Yalkut Shimoni basically has a Midrash. He quotes a Midrash that basically there was a conversation between Hashem and Moshe. I'm just repeating again for those who are listening. I'm repeating the third time. I'll repeat it 5 times even. But basically, Hashem and Moshe have a conversation. Hashem says to Moshe, "If you want to live a long life, I'll grant you that wish to live a long life, but that means Bnei Israel won't win the war of Midian." Because if you look at the pasuk, it says, "Nikom mikmat, take revenge. Bnei Israel should take revenge from the Midianim. Achar te'asef alamecha. Then you will then you will pass away." Josh Dalit. So he says, what is the connection in Matot? So the question is, what is the connection between the two pieces? Meaning there seems to be like some sort of gap in between that doesn't. There's a missing link between the war with Midian and Moshe's passing. So the Midrash says that Hashem has a conversation, and Moshe responds saying, "I'd rather Bnei Israel see the death and the vengeance of the Midianim, and let them conquer the Midian." And they will see the falling, the vengeance of Bnei Israel, of the Midianim dying in their eyes, and I'll take a step back and I'll take a step down. So the question is, what is the connection? And we already quoted the Mikubalim that say that any king or leader, any Jewish king or leader who wants to take revenge or conquer another nation, they have to have some sort of connection to that nation. So he brings 3 examples. Pinchas, who comes from Putiel, meaning the daughters of Midian, right from Midian, and therefore he can go and take revenge in Midian. Same thing with David, who goes from Ruth, and he takes revenge with Moab. Same thing with Yoshua, and he was from the Zera of Yosef, and therefore Yosef, who was married to Potiphar, he goes through a whole connection. Basically saying is that Yoshua has a connection as well. Yeshua has a connection, and therefore he can later on down the line he can fight with Amalek. But the question still remains: is why does the leader have to have the connection to the nation in which he's going to fight with? So as I was saying, is the Zera Shimshon takes an approach that to me is probably one of the, I don't want to say wild, but it's like very unique, something that none of us would have thought of. but it's fascinating and yet fascinating yet very clear at the same time. So he says, "V'yesh loma de'ita b'shulchan aruch Orach Chaim tashmishe kedusha kigon tik shel tefillin u'mezuzot v'sfarim yesh lam kedusha v'tzarich lingon zman." So there's a halacha that it says in Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, it says that anything that tashmish kedusha, like for example the boxes of the tefillin or the bag of the tefillin itself. So when after you wears out or they fall apart. So the halacha is you actually have to, or the cover of the Sefer Torah, or nowadays even when we buy a set of Sfarim, sometimes they come in those sleeves, those little cardboard sleeves. So the halacha actually says if you buy it in the sleeve, and then you take them right out of the sleeve in your house, then you can throw the box out, that little sleeve. But if you put them into your shelf in the sleeve, then you're showing that is already part of the Sfarim, and then you probably need to put those pieces of cardboard into Geniza. Wow. Interestingly, I didn't know that either. I just heard it when I was listening to the Shir, the review. Someone said that, and I was like, wow, mind blown.
You said for like a tallit bag also.
Yeah, tallit bag also. Yeah.
Do you think the plastic? That's the.
No, the plastic I would not. No. That's just a protective, right? That's less of. Wow. So, but wow. Definitely the tefillin bag. And definitely, I would even go. I would.
Tashmishay kedusha.
You're right. As opposed to the plastic bathroom, I would say for sure. Yeah. As opposed to tashmishay mitzvah, right? The beged itself of tzitzis does not need to be geniza. But if it has tzitzis on it, it probably does. But if you take you take the tzitzis off, then it's just a beged. Then it doesn't need anything. It's just the reason why you need to wear tzitzis is because you're wearing a four-corner garment. So it's not really. It's just a secondary level. But anyway, so he says. And then later on it says in that same seif it says da'aron habanui b'choma im hasfarim mitkalkalim bo ein bo kedusha. So a good example would be right here. If you look at the lights, right? So it almost has if you look, you want to make an aron kodesh into that little hole there, right? You want to make an aron kodesh in there. So you carve it out a little bit more, and you put the svarim in there, right? Remember in the olden days, what did you have? The svarim were made out of megillos. They weren't just right. You want to make an aron kodesh in there. So you make it dig it a little deeper, right? You kind of it's already there, the hole's there, but you want to make it deeper so the Sefer Torah goes in. So the halacha is that if I retrofit this little square in the wall after it's already been built, and now that I made that hole, what happens? The Sfarim, of course, says Ima Sfarim mitkalkalim bo ein bo kedusha. Right? Let's say I make a hole, and our lovely cousins sometimes don't do the best job on their work. So when they do that. They make a hole, and what happens? The water comes in, or something starts crumbling, and the books get destroyed, or the Sefer Kodesh, God forbid, get destroyed. So there's no kedusha on that space at all, because it was never ever a tashmish for kedusha. Why not? Because it was ruining it from the. As soon as you made that hole, the hole itself was already destroying the svarim. It wasn't keeping them, it wasn't protecting them. It was actually destroying them. Do you understand? No. Right. So a bookcase. Actually, I learned there was actually a Rav. I forgot who it was already. He said that there was a Rav that was the bookcase. He said, "I want to be buried. I want to make my coffin out of the bookcase that I learned from all the svarim that I used." Because he was like, So the Rav who was giving the shiur over on this piece, he said is halavai that we all should use the bookcase of the amount of svarim that he used, the amount of bookcases that he used. But anyway, so he said so basically, if we retrofit a space that already exists and it actually causes detriment to the svarim that are in there, the Magen Avram says, "The lo chala alav kedusha meikara, the lo mikra tashmish diyudei."
The space itself.
Yeah, the space itself. Right. The space itself is not considered a makom kedusha, but rather it's actually amazing. It's actually destroying, because when I put the svarim in there, it's not doing anything. It's actually causing more harm to the svarim. That's a little side note, but that side note is going to be very important in a second. So now he says, "V'nei noda lechachmei hamet shekol haneshamot hakedushot mitchila hayu biyad haklipot." So according to, now he quotes the Mekubalim. Chachmei hamet is another code word for Mekubalim. Now I wish I understood all of what he's saying here, but at least we'll understand in the most basic way. And he says is that every neshama kedusha, every holy neshama started from the hands of the other side. And as it says in Iyov, Mi yitain tahor mitameh, kigon Avraham miterach, v'chein David hayam mimoab. Right? And so he says, he gives two good examples. And he says, he gives two examples. One is Avraham from Terach. Terach was like the Avatuma, right? We know, like he was like the ultimate, he was like the leader of Avodah Zarah at his time. And David comes from Moab. And the Midrash says, Matzati David Avdi, Hechan Metzati Bisdom, V'chein Pinchas ba mi binot Putiel, V'chein Yoshua ba mi Yosef Shalkach Osnat bat Potifera. V'od haya muchan lekabel rachav hazonah letashlim chatzi gufo k'dechar below nukva pela gufa. So he's basically saying is that every one of the leaders that we've had in the past, and it always comes up, we always ask that question, we always hear nice midrashim that it had to become, David had to come from Ruth Movia, or Abram had to come from Terach, or something like that. So the Zera Shimshon says it's based on Alpi Kabbalah, that you have to have the source of the Kedusha has to come from something rotten beforehand, right? It has to come from there. Okay, so that's what he's saying for now. Now, if we understand all of what we just said so far, so which is basically that Moshe and Hashem had a conversation as who should I die or should I let the Bnei Israel, should I live longer and therefore Bnei Israel will not conquer Binyan? And he says is that every nation and every leader, meaning every leader of the Jewish people, in order for them to make a vengeance, take vengeance on that nation, you have to have some sort of connection. And now he basically, so far he's saying is what's the connection? How do we get there? So he's made this little connection between Tashmishe Kedusha. Now he says, V'im ken haya salka datach shekmo shekodem hotzaat hanitzot hakadoshot me'aklipot lo utar lanu lasot milchama im ota uma. Just like we would have thought that just like before, right in the moment before these nitzot kedusha, these holy sparks were taken out, we would not be allowed to take war, or go to war with them. Kmo shenitzava Moshe shelo lasot milchama im Amon u'Moab. Right, Moshe was last in a few Parshat ago. Moshe said you cannot go. Well, Hashem told Moshe you can't go to war with Ammon and Moab. Why not? The Gemara in Baba Kama says, "Bishvil shnei predot tovot atid lotzi mehem." There are two great predot are like calves or female calves, right? He says two beautiful female animals that are going to come out. What are the animals? Ammon and Moab are Nama. Nama is Shlomo Melech's wife. And Ruth from Moab. Because those two nations there's something going to happen there, Hashem says you can't go to war.
You can't instigate the war.
You can't instigate the war, right? You can create a situation in which is what happens is basically Sichon.
If
Right.
attacking us.
Right, you can, right. So he says, right? So let's say, so he's saying is we would have thought that beforehand, maybe we can't do anything. Because why? Because we're not, before these holy sparks were taken out, we're not allowed to do anything, wage war, just like Moshe was told he can't wage war with Ammon and Moab. And he says also, same thing with afterwards, we would have thought that after these two women, meaning after Naamah and Ruth, come out of those two nations, that maybe we would have thought that we should, either it's okay, or we could say maybe they remain holy because we don't know. We just don't know when the next, maybe there's another person that needs to come out of that, right? So just like a ticket of a kedusha, right? Meaning once Ruth and Naamah come out of there, maybe that nation still has like a tashmish kedusha, right? They're like the bookcase, they're like the tefillin bag. Maybe they're like the tefillin bag, and therefore the tefillin bag still has some kedusha, right? They have like a residual kedusha, if you will, right? Meaning they should be held totally.
100,000% residual. And something.
Right.
I just experienced it this week.
Oh yeah? All right.
Here. What's the story?
What's the story?
Dennis is that the new house, thank God, that we moved into.
Should be a good issue.
We had like many boxes in the room that we appropriated for the library in the house. And the gentleman who lived in the house before is a tremendous Talmud Chacham. And he thank God he left us a lot of bookcases that we can fill and hopefully use very well. And the room was very, very full of boxes. So we hadn't used them the 2 weeks that we were living there. And finally we got all the boxes out of there and we put our Sfarim on the table, on the shelves. And we managed to squeeze the couch into there, which was clearly the hand of God in and of itself. And then, when my wife and I walked into the room and sat down on the couch for the first time, we just went, "Oh, do you feel that? This place is very
holy." Yeah.
No, please come over. It's an unbelievably muted vibe. It's just you can tell like this is a room like for thinking. This is a room for contemplation and for learning, and like it's infused with this guy's years of learning in there. Wow, it's amazing. Wow. Should be Zocha to have many years of learning there as well.
Amen.
So he says here, Ela mitzad acher. Maybe we could say the other side. Thank you for that. There is such a thing as residual kedusha. And it says, Ela mitzad acher. Yesh lomar shahu il shenitzot kedusha ayum mitkalkalim betocham lo nikru me'olam teshvish kedusha ala maziklu kedusha. We could say the opposite. We could say maybe maybe we should look at it the other way and say is maybe because these tashmishe kedusha were they're going rotten in there, so they're actually causing the harm. So maybe we should say what they never had kedusha from the milachad chila, right? In other words, Ruta Moaviyah had Naamah. In fact, he says, "Va'od shemana oto anitzot milavo la'olam kodem lechen, abal me'eno me'an mucha shaklipa azika oto anitzot zilma shamra oto karaui." So he's basically saying is that this nitzot was basically being prevented from coming out because it was sitting in a room or sitting in a nation that was causing it harm. So it didn't have a place to really actualize its potential. So basically what he's asking here, he's saying is that you have two sides. Either way you look at it, we can either look at it that the nation, if they didn't go to war, as he says here in the beginning, he says in the beginning of this paragraph, he says is maybe we're not allowed to go to war at all because it's considered a tashmish kedusha, and therefore it's a tashmish kedusha, it's ton gnizam. You just got to respect it and let it go, right? Or we have to say the other side that maybe it's causing so much harm that perhaps we just have to free it from that harm, because otherwise what's going to happen? It's gonna cause damage, and we don't know how far down the line this person or this thing is going to come out. So we have to do something about it. He says this is why the nitzos, meaning like the Moshe from, like Pinchas from Putiel, Yoshua with Amalek, Yosef with Potiphar, right? Exactly. All these, Abram and Terah, right? All these nations, the people who are going to take revenge have to come from that one. Have to come from the nation itself. He says, he knows, meaning that spark that comes from that nation knows what damage is being caused by that nation. Meaning it's like we all, God forbid, and I don't want to say like it's a bad example, but maybe a good example is, when someone says, does it take one to know one? Meaning, right, there's a famous, does it take one to know, like, the Havdil, an alcoholic. So who's the best person to be a social worker? Someone who's gone through, experienced some sort of trauma, and then they can go back and sit with a group of therapy, and an alcoholic can go alcoholic, right? Who's the best person to talk to?
Done that,
right, exactly. Right, exactly. So he's saying something. Again, a very bad example, very bad, but the idea is there. The concept is maybe the person who's going to know the best how much damage is going to be, how much harm this can be, is the person who's lived there. The person
grown out of it.
Right, he's grown out of it. Who's the nitzos, right? Right, he's grown out of it, and now I go back and say, okay, now I can do it, and now I can tell you.
It's experiment.
All right. Mute one of them.
Anyway, so the idea is, I love hearing myself so much. So anyway, so it's so he says here like this. So he says only that nitzos, like Moshe, or Moshe is going to get to in a second, with Pinchas, with Midian, etc. Every one of them, they know the damage that they can cause, and therefore, because they know the damage, they're the ones who can cause. They can go to war with that nation. Now he brings another Shulchan Aruch, another quote from the Shulchan Aruch. Look at this fascinating thing. He says, "Hamazik mamon michab ero ve'en yodeh ma'hizek hanizok nishba v'notel ketzad." So it says here. Let's say Reuven damages Shimon's property. Hold on a second here. I'm just having a little. The echo is bothering me a little bit.
Nothing. Mine knows what psychedelic color is. I'm not even wearing a tie-dye t-shirt tonight.
Okay, there we go. That's classic. Anyway, so he says here. So he says that the Shulchan Aruch says that let's say I damage your property. I say, right, and I don't know what's in the property that I damaged. Let's say, so he gives an example. It says here, Haresh lakach kli satu mechavero ve'tudo layam or safro ba'esh ve'ta'an hanizok shaya malei margiliot ve'kertzei ne'eman. Right. So he says here, let's say I go into your house, or I take a jewelry box from your house. It's closed. It's sealed. I have no idea what's in there. I throw it into the water. I run it over with my car. I burn it, whatever. And now you say it was filled with pearls. How am I supposed to know what was in there? I don't know. I just took the box. And so the person who was damaged, the box was damaged, right? He's allowed to say is, I swear that there were pearls in there, and therefore you owe me $10,000 or whatever the number is. I'm allowed to be the court. Obviously, you have to swear on it, but you're believed, right? So he says is we may not know the damage, but we know that the neshama does. The neshama knows the damage. Meaning that's what he's trying to use that halacha to kind of say we don't know the damage that was really done, but really the neshama of this nitzot that was really come from this nation, he knows the real damage, right? When we go to, who best to go to when you're trying to be, bring Jews closer to Judaism? What kind of person will be better? Is it be a person who's never experienced the other side? Or is it the person who's experienced it and knows how to talk that language, right? Knows to talk, knows to walk, right? Who's going to do it better, right? So there's an argument on either way. You can make the case either way, but usually predominantly the person who's going to make a better case is going to be the person who says listen, I was there, right? The ex-con is always going to be able to talk to the person who's in jail better than the person who's never been to jail.
They're straight.
Right, exactly. All those kind of things. So every one of and there's a series of examples that we can use. And he says, look at this. So he says here, if that spark, imagine for a second that Moshe didn't take, or Pinchas didn't take vengeance against that nation, it's a sign, he says, that he never was damaged by that nation. Right? So for example, let's say Pinchas never took the risk that he took. And he never waged war against him. Or Yosef or David never waged war with Moab. Right? So Zera Shimshon is saying is that if you do that, if he doesn't actually go to war with them, it means that he was not really damaged by them as much as he thought he was. Because he's basically saying is that in order for the person to really go to war, it means that you were really damaged, meaning that you were hurt by it. Right? And he's saying if you were hurt by it, you have to then you can go to war. He says, and the nation, so he's saying is that the nation of that nitzot or that tzaddik can't take revenge right away, because actually in that way, it's like Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Moshe Rabbeinu. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu not why did he not take care of the first three makot? Rashi says it clearly. Rashi says in that situation, those first three makot, because he owes a little bit of hakarat hatov for what happened. He was saved by the land, right? He was saved by the sand because he buried the Egyptian. Buried the Egyptian, right? So he has some sort of level of hakarat hatov. Now the question always becomes, if we look at the Mitzrim, right, we're allowed to marry third generation Mitzri, but we're not allowed to marry first generation Mitzri, right? So the Gemara goes says right away. He says we have to at least acknowledge the fact that they hosted us, right? Right. So again, it's very hard to accept that, and it's very hard to look at many examples, right? And if you look at any example of history, be like, and so I was listening to the shiur about this class, and he says that. Imagine you go away for some place for Shabbos, and no one's hosting you. And some guy says, you can come to my house, and his house is not the house that you were expecting, and he puts you in your room, and he locks the door, and he puts in you turn on the light before Shabbos, and you're on the floor. There's no bed, no nothing.
Thank you.
Right? You still say thank you very much, and you swallow your pride and you leave. Right? So do you appreciate? Do you have hakarat hatov? Yeah, because you didn't have to sleep in the cold. But do you have as much hakarat hatov as that, as a person who hosted you with warmth and a smile and gave you food? No, you don't have the same level, but you have a basic level of hakarat hatov. So he's saying is that the tzaddik, or this nitzos of kedusha, that can't take revenge is because maybe that during that time.
Nitzos is a spark, right?
Yeah, nitzos is a spark. He's saying maybe that spark of kedusha that was from that person, maybe at the time he didn't really hurt the person, he didn't damage him. He didn't do good. We just left him be. And therefore, he's like a...
And the way to tell is if they go to war against someone else?
Yeah, that's what he's saying. It's crazy, isn't it?
It's a little crazy.
It is a little crazy. Anyway, so he says here, right? The nitzos didn't ask for anything. V'kan min adin shaya Yisrael yasu nikama lifi ma she'ichtiyam. Ela lifi she'Moshe nitgadel sham. This is, now if you look here, now he brings it all together. Brings it all together. He says here, this is why min adin, meaning this is why it was justified for Yisrael to take war against Midian. Right? You could say is that maybe they should take. They did it. It was a grave sin what they did. What happened? Right? Bnei Yisrael should be able to take nekama against Midian because of what they did. And it says, "Ela lefisha Moshe nitkadel sham nasa isha sham haytat tzricha milchamad zo la'asot al yedei Moshe." It had to be specifically by Moshe, not by anyone else. Moshe had to be the one to fight Midianim. It wasn't that Bnei Yisrael. Yes, Bnei Yisrael, their sin was bad. No one's denying that. And yes, they had just cause. But it had to be Moshe who's the one who says, "Let's go to war." It had to be Moshe because Moshe is the one who grew up in Midian. He married a Midianite. And therefore, he's the one who says, "I know how to get them. I'm the one. I'm the kedusha. I'm the spark of kedusha that came out of Midian, and therefore, I'm the one who can tell you how to go to war, wage war." And that's what he says here. To show Bnei Israel that these nations, that is Midian, has no din of tashmish kedusha. I mean, they don't have to be. You don't have to. They're not protected in some way because they were holding me in as a force of kedusha. No, they have no kedusha whatsoever. Right? Had Moshe died before the war with Midian, then Bnei Yisrael basically would never be able to take revenge on Midian, because Moshe was the one who knew. Moshe was the one who had all the underpinnings of what to do. That's why the two parts of the sentences, which seemingly don't necessarily sound connected, he says is they're connected because Moshe is the one, specifically Moshe is the one who had to take revenge, and not anyone other nation. Yes.
I was just looking at the pasuk was again.
So the pasuk, right? It says here, "Nekom mikvat bnei Israel meita Midianim," meaning go to war with the Midianim, and the next word is achar te'asef alamecha. So the condition, the statement in the pasuk sounds like one. It sounds like if once we go to war, you're going to die. And the Zera Shimshon says it is not that and if we look at it, we have to understand that the Zera Shimshon is saying it's not a conditional statement. It's not if then, which is what you would read it, like the way you read it in Parshat. It sounds like once we go to war, you're going to die. And the Zera Shimshon is saying it's nothing to do with that. He's saying is that once this happened, right? That's not what it is. Moshe needs to die, but if he dies, then the Jews would never be able to think that perhaps if he were to die, meaning if Moshe were to die first, then they would say is that maybe that they would think that the Midianim had some sort of level of tashmish kedusha, meaning they still had this like what did we say before?
I got you. They had a holy
residue, and therefore they can never touch them. They're like protected.
But because the person who was affected by Midian is able to go to war against Midian, it's made clear that
exactly.
Yes.
And therefore, and in fact, it's interesting that it's Moshe and Pinchas. The two of them are the ones who go to war with Midian, because both of them come from Midian itself. Moshe comes from Midian because he married a Midianite, and he was saved by Midian, and Pinchas, Yisro. So both of them come from, therefore they're connecting from Midian, and therefore we could say is only Moshe and Pinchas are the ones who can go back to wage war with the Midianim, because to show Bnei Yisrael saying is it has nothing to do with the war and my death and my passing have nothing to do with, and to show you that they are not protected by this Tashmish Kedusha theory, but rather it's much more than that. It's rather that because me and Pinchas, even though he doesn't say Pinchas here, but let's just use Pinchas because he mentions Pinchas in the whole Torah, because Moshe and Pinchas were part of the Midiani family, meaning they were part of the Midiani ethos, ecosystem, or whatever you want to call it, because they were part of it, therefore they're the ones who could say is they are not protected by the Tashmish Kedusha theory, and therefore we can take them we go to war, we can kill them, and they have nothing. In fact, they were actually being, maybe even saying is they were destructive in some way. Like what we said is like, if we have the wall, then they were destructive, and therefore they are not telling Keniza, and therefore even more so is perhaps that they've never even held the Kedusha correctly.
Yes.
Good Torah. The next one is even better.
I gotta go. It's been a pleasure. I'm so happy I got to do that.
This still doesn't answer the second
Good
question.
job.
You always say this two questions.
Remember we got
I won't answer it.
Zera Shimshon shorts. We've
If you look
got
over here in the next
another
paragraph,
part
I've
coming
stopped one
from
part, I've stopped
Mordecai
one part.
Holtz. Thank you very
It
much.
says
And
Gaon kasher l'shon midrash. דאמר שאם משה היה רוצה לחיות הרבה, לא היה אפשר לשאול אותו לקראתם. It still doesn't answer the question.
Yes, no.
It doesn't answer that. I was waiting the whole time. I was looking at it.
We had the midnight collar.
I didn't want to take.
Heart size collar. We're still live, so let's just say goodbye.
Smoked fish is for
Goodbye.
הצלחה.
Part 2 coming soon.
Anniversary,
Ah.
Stay tuned.